From KCCI 8 News, this is a special presentation. Coffee with the Candidates.
Hello and welcome to our series, Coffee with the Candidates. I'm Amanda Rooker. Today, we're talking with Ron DeSantis. We're getting to know presidential candidates, going to towns all across the state so that Iowans can ask about the issues they care about. Today, we're in Adel in Dallas County. 37% of active voters in Dallas County are Republican. In 2016, 50% of voters cast their ballots for Donald Trump. And again, in 2020, 50% voted for Trump. We'll sit down with 3 undecided Republicans from right here in Dallas County. They'll ask DeSantis about the issues that matter to them over a cup of coffee. But first, let's take a look at Ron DeSantis' background. Ron DeSantis served in the U.S. Navy before he was elected to represent Florida in Congress in 2012. He was later elected as governor of Florida in 2018 and re-elected in 2022. Well, I'm here today with Florida Governor and Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we start with the latest Iowa polling from the Des Moines Register, NBC News, and Mediacom. It shows for Trump supporters in Iowa, 41% of them say you are their second choice. How do you convince those people to instead caucus for you?
Well, we got a good head start on that with Governor Kim Reynolds endorsing us on Monday. I mean, she is universally respected by Republican voters, particularly the caucus goers, because of the great job she's done. And I think her coming out the way she did was a huge statement. I think a lot of people are looking at that and say, you know what, this is really meaningful. But ultimately, what I can show is we need somebody that's going to fight. You got to fight for these people. And while I think Donald Trump would fight, we also need someone that's going to win. Like, yes, win elections. Republicans have been losing elections in the last few cycles, but also win on the big issues that matter to people. Actually do the border, actually get the economy going, actually deal with all these important things with our military. And then we need somebody that's going to lead. This country needs a resurgence, and I'll be the leader that's going to be able to get that done.
When I talk to Iowans who say Trump is their choice, a lot of them tell me, I like how the economy was when he was president. I like what he did appointing Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade. When people say they saw his record and they like that, why should they instead trust you to do a better job?
Well, actually, on the economy, I think the first 3 years the economy was sound on him. The last year it was not, because he turned over the reins to Anthony Fauci. There was a shutdown of the country. You know, he used to brag that he shut down the greatest economy in the world, but that's had massive reverberations, and the inflation that we're dealing with today, the roots are really with those Trump-Fauci lockdowns in March of 2020. Federal Reserve printed all this money. Congress borrowed and spent trillions of dollars. Of course, you're going to get inflation there. Whereas I think in Florida, we really have led the way on the economy, even during COVID, because we had our state open. We were getting businesses. We were getting people to invest in our state. And if you look just in the last, since COVID, if Florida was its own country, we'd be number 2 in the world for growth behind India. That's a pretty incredible record. So I think our record on the economy is second to none. I'll be able to go in there. We're going to have total energy independence. We're going to lower people's gas prices. We're going to stop Congress from spending so much money. Donald Trump did not do that. He added a massive amount to the national debt. I'll do that in a different direction. We're going to reverse Bidenomics and make sure that that's not crushing people so that they have an ability to do well going forward. But we have the track record of economic success that is second to none.
A lot of people, when they talk about Iowa, keep calling it a race for second. Do you believe that to be true? Does that bother you?
Well, people may be trying to do second, not me. I mean, we're in it to win it. You would not have had Governor Kim Reynolds endorse us for second. Like, that's not how she rolls. She knows that winning Iowa is important, and so that's what we're going to do. And I think if you look at what we've done, we've laid the groundwork to be able to win the caucus with the organization, visiting the rural counties. That's not something that you can necessarily quantify right now, but it's something that comes up as people start to make their decisions about who they're going to caucus for. We've put in the work here. We're going to continue to put in the work here.
And I want to talk about that endorsement from Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. Do you see a place for her in your cabinet if you were president, or do you see her as a potential running mate?
So I think she could do any of those positions. And it'd really be up to her if that was something she wanted. I've treaded a little gingerly on that in Iowa because every time you mention her, people start clapping, right? But then when they asked about running mate, I'll oftentimes ask people, well, who do you want? And people have different things. But anytime anyone mentions Kim, there's some disagreement in the crowd because they say they want to keep her as governor and they don't want her to go because Iowa doesn't have term limits the way Florida does. See, I'm term limited in Florida. I couldn't run again anyways. People appreciate the job that she's done here. So I think however she wants to serve, she'll be able to serve.
I want to talk to you about abortion, but first, yes or no, do you support a federal abortion ban?
Well, what I've said is it's going to be a bottom-up situation. We have to stand for a culture of life. Clearly, states are going to have leeway to be able to make decisions. I know there's been talk about some of these gruesome late-term procedures. Of course, I don't believe that should happen in any state. But the reality is, this is going to be, Iowa is not going to be the same as New Hampshire. I think we understand that.
So are you saying, talking about a federal ban, are you saying that it would be difficult to create consensus when you're talking about a bottom-up approach? I know Nikki Haley has talked about saying, it's impossible right now to get to a federal abortion ban. Is that the same sentiment?
But she has basically, she's not embraced pro-life policies at all. I mean, Iowa, as heartbeat bill, South Carolina, I don't think that she's ever said that she actually thinks that those were good ideas, even in the states doing it. So I think she's coming out of a little bit different perspective. But the reality is the country is divided on the issue. And I think you've seen the back and forth at the state level. Well, I can tell you this, though, we will stand for a culture of life. And part of that means supporting things like Iowa's done and Florida's done with heartbeat protection bills. But part of it also means making sure that the fathers are involved. I think that as soon as a woman's pregnant, that the father owes support for the woman. I think we need to make sure that people have the ability to raise kids in ways that are economically viable. You have the inflation, you have all these other things. So there's a lot you need to do throughout the whole course of people's lives, and sometimes Republicans haven't been as tuned to that. I understand the importance of it.
Well, Governor, that's all the time we have for our conversation, but we're actually going to take it up a notch. We're going to sit down with a group of undecided Republicans, and they are going to ask Governor DeSantis some questions. We'll be right back.
Coffee with the Candidates continues right now.
Go ahead.
Our conversation with Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis continues at the Morning Grind Coffee Shop in Adel. Welcome back to Coffee with the Candidates. We're here today with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
We are also here with a group of Iowa Republicans from right here in Dallas County, and all three of you are undecided in who you plan to caucus for in January. Well, you guys actually have some questions for Governor DeSantis. I may jump in with a few follow-ups as well. Chad, we're going to start with you. You work in construction, you have a background in engineering, and you have a question for the governor about the economy.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. The inflation rate's well above pre-pandemic levels. We're paying more for goods and services in all aspects of our life. What's your plan to lower inflation to a manageable level?
And that's affected your company, I'd imagine?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you had to make decisions as a result? Because, they say inflation is 5%, 8%, but like some of these businesses, it's like things have gone up 50%, 75%. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, we're a sales organization, and keeping pace with price increases has been a challenge the past 3 years. So it's. But
we'll do a few things. One, the reason why we have this started with the COVID lockdowns. Supply chain got disrupted. They borrowed, printed, and spent trillions and trillions of dollars. Federal Reserve printed more money and said inflation wasn't going to happen, and it got away from them. Now they've been raising interest rates, and that causes problems in the economy too. So one, we're going to hold Congress accountable for overspending. As governor of Florida, I vetoed billions of dollars in wasteful spending. We've paid down 25% of our state's debt just since I've been governor. Two, the regulatory burden is contributing to this. I'm going to take all the Bidenomics, we're going to rip it out, throw it in the trash can on day one. Energy, lowering gas, lowering energy costs is by expanding domestic production. We have more oil and gas in this country than anywhere in the world. We got to use it. It's good for our national security, but it's also good for businesses, and it's good for consumers and individuals. And then, if you look, we could sit here and get the budget in good order, and it would make a difference. But 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, a new Congress comes in, they end up undoing it, and they do the same bad habits. So we do need structural reform. We need term limits for members of Congress, and we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I don't know that Congress would do it, but states can do it. Florida's already certified, so I'll use the bully pulpit to work with states to bring that to have under Article 5 of the Constitution, hold Congress accountable for this, because I think people are there for 40 years now, and it's the same old stuff, and they never actually change the way things are doing business. We need new blood in Washington, D.C.
Governor, do you think that's possible to get states to actually try to implement amending the Constitution? That's a big thing that you're proposing.
Well, here's the thing. So there's actually an argument that enough states have already certified a balanced budget amendment to go. That's actually probably going to be litigated soon, but there's been a lot that have done it. And balanced budget amendment actually failed in Congress by 1 vote in 1995. So that's doable. Term limits is popular. Even Democrat, Republican, independent voters want term limits for Congress. So I think it would be something, a lot of states have already certified that. You use the bully pulpit, we can get more states to do it. And I think it would develop a big momentum behind it. The founders created an ability for the states to lead constitutional amendment because they knew you could develop a ruling class that was looking out for itself and wasn't really willing to reform. That's what's happened in these last few decades, and so we need the people to be able to stand up and say, no, let's chart a different course.
Jade has the next question. She owns a small women's boutique in Perry. She was actually in Des Moines when the governor endorsed you, and she has a question about some remarks you made.
Sure.
Yeah, so you said you were in favor of building the border wall and that you would get Mexico to pay for it. Obviously, that's something we've been promised before. What are you going to do differently than Trump to get it done?
Yeah, look, I mean, that was one of the most famous campaign promises anyone's ever made. And now he's been in Iowa just in the last month saying, well, there was no legal mechanism he could get Mexico to pay. That wasn't what he said in 16. I was at those rallies. He was very clear. And he's also now said that he only promised that Mexico would pay for a piece of the wall. I don't ever remember him saying that. So he didn't follow through on it. And I think it's because he got distracted when he got into office. What did he do his first full day in office? He was arguing with the media about the crowd size at his inauguration. I will be focused and I will be disciplined. And it's not about me, it's about you and the issues you care about. So the way you get Mexico to pay for it, of course they're not just going to fork over money. You impose fees on the remittances that foreign workers send to foreign countries. So when they come, they do a wire transfer to Mexico, South America, Asia. It's a $100 billion enterprise a year. You just do a small fee, you'll raise billions of dollars. That money will go to do the border wall, and we will do it. And if you think about it, had Donald Trump done the border wall, it wouldn't matter what Biden would do. He would not have been able to let in 8 million illegal aliens. Like, that's why you want a wall. Because sometimes people say, even on the Republican side, oh, you don't need a wall. You can use technology and this and that. And ideally, if like we all agreed that we wanted a secure border, you could probably do it. But the minute an administration comes in that doesn't care about it, then the floodgates open. That's why you need the wall. It's a physical fact of life that keeps people from coming in. And if you look at the drugs that have come in, if you look at all the criminal aliens, the media got mad at me at the debate the other night because I said terrorists have come into this country. Do you honestly believe out of 8 million people that not a single terrorist has come in? Well, we know there's some on the terror watch list because our own government has said, our enemies see this vulnerability, of course they're going to exploit it. And that's what they're going to do. So that wall is an important part. Another important part is changing the policy so people don't have a right to come and then get a hall pass to stay in the country for 2 years. You remain in Mexico if you're going to come and make some type of a claim. And then we got to take care of the drug cartels. They're invading our country. They're killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens every year. And the thing about it is, sometimes people will say, oh, well, it's being addicted to drugs is a tough thing. But yes, that's true, but that's not the sum total of these deaths. What happens is you can have someone who's in college, they buy a pill that they think is something else, and it's laced with fentanyl, and then they take it and they die just on one pill. That is poisoning somebody. That is wrong, and so they're killing a lot of our citizens. So we're going to treat them as a foreign terrorist organization. We're going to use military to smoke out the drug cartels. That will save lives in this country, and it's the right thing to do.
You say you're an authorized deadly force. How do you tell the difference between who is a member of the cartel and who is a migrant. And oftentimes these cartels involve people that look like migrants, or how do you
the same
tell?
Way you did. So when I was deployed in Iraq, the terrorists were not wearing uniforms. You could be out, you'd have someone come up in a man dress. Maybe they had a bomb, maybe they didn't. And so you use intelligence, you positively identify people that are part of the enemy force, and once you've positively identified them, you have the right to engage. And so there's intelligence, there's all kinds of stuff. We have a lot of technology where we're going to be able to identify, trust me. These guys, I was in Arizona, and there was actually a stretch of wall there that actually Obama put up. And these guys were working on the wall. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, we're repairing it. I was like, what happened? They're like, the cartels cut a hole. And these are big steel. They cut a hole in it and came in. Nobody stopped them. They have backpacks with fentanyl and they're just coming in. That's a situation where they're breaking into our country. I mean, imagine if someone, you're there with your family, someone breaks into your house. You would repel them from being able to come into your house and harm your family. And yet what? We're just supposed to sit there and let this happen? A president not only has the right, I think you have the obligation to defend the American people when you have hostile forces that are coming into your country and killing your citizens. And you remember, I mean, I was young, you guys were younger, but when 9/11 happened, we were resolved. We were going to move heaven and earth. You do not come in and kill 3,000 people in this country, and rightfully so. Well, they're killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens. And I talked to a friend the other day who lost his son from a fentanyl really poisoning, and that's a difficult thing, of course, because when you lose a kid, that's the biggest hole that it can never be refilled. But what he said was, what added salt in the wounds was the indifference that our DC elites have to this problem. Like they know this is ravaging communities all across this country. They know it's devastating families, and they're not taking the type of action necessary to stop this from happening. So times are going to change on January 20th, 2025.
Shifting gears a little bit, we're in Iowa. We're going to talk a little bit about agriculture, a little bit about renewable fuels. Tim's father-in-law runs a family-owned farming operation in Northeast Iowa. He has a question for you about that.
Yeah, this is kind of a unique one that I wasn't aware of. So I repeatedly hear him talking about the current subsidies for renewable energy solutions like solar and wind being installed on tillable land. And it's actually taking farmland that he feels should be used for food, and they should use it elsewhere. What would you do to implement more common sense measures of renewable energy, as well as do you see an opportunity for nuclear energy in the future?
Yes, on nuclear, and yes, I agree with your dad about I want that land used for farming. I think it's really important. I think it's good for the economy. I think it's good for our national security to have food security. I mean, I want this here in Iowa to be an integral part of this country's future. So I'm not one that would want to impose mandates for wind and solar. I would take those mandates away. I'm not opposed to people if they want to do it, but to try to force that, I think is a mistake. I also oppose what Biden's done to force electric vehicles. I think that that's something that's going to be expensive for a lot of people. There's not a lot of demand for it. I think it's going to be bad for our auto industry. I think it'll be bad for jobs. It'll be bad for liquid fuels because people won't be using that as much. And so we're gonna reverse that and let you make a decision. If you want that, then that's fine. But I want to save the traditional American automobile. And then finally, in terms of the farming, I want family farms to be able to thrive. And so I think we need to eliminate the death tax for farms. I mean, I want it eliminated, period. But if we could at least do it for farms, because what happens with the farms is you're land rich but cash poor. So maybe you have farmland that's worth millions of dollars, but you don't have that in your bank account. So in order to pay the tax, you got to sell the farm and then pay the government. Well, how is that keeping it in the family? And so that ends up driving more of the corporatization of agriculture, which, look, I get there's a role for big companies in this, but man, I want this to be something that can remain in families. Ultimately, that's part of what America's all about.
Whenever Donald Trump is in Iowa, I've been to a lot of his campaign stops, and he talks about you. A lot of times he's talking about your policy on ethanol, and he tells Iowans that your policy on ethanol would be devastating for them. He's citing in 2017 when you were in Congress, you co-sponsored a bill that would end the federal ethanol mandate. If you were president, would you end that mandate?
So what I've said is we're going to support renewable fuels as part of our overall energy. And part of it is because I want domestic produced energy with American jobs. And so here in the Midwest, that's an important component to what people are doing with energy. We're going to support it. I think the fact that we're going to do things like stop the electric vehicle mandates is going to be very helpful for people who are in the renewable fuels industry. We're also going to get the EPA and some of these federal agencies off the back of the farmers. So people are going to be able to do very well here, and we understand how important it is in the Midwest, and you can count on me to be supportive.
Great. So you'd keep that federal mandate in place. Next question is going to be for Chad. He's a father like you of young kids. He has a question about education.
Yeah, you have a very successful track record in regards to education in Florida. How would you apply those successes from your role as governor to the rest of the Americans?
Well, look, I think that this issue, we've got to get right as a country because I think Iowa's done good things. I think Florida's done good things, but I think a lot of areas are really, really struggling. And part of it was they locked kids out of school for a long time. We fought to keep schools open. Your governor here did a great job, and it was really important to do. But we've had a lot of learning loss. Our kids are really struggling. How do you do that? Well, one of the things I think you have to do, we have to empower parents. So part of that means parents' rights to direct the education and upbringing. They should have the right to access the curriculum. How are we in a situation where people are jamming pornographic materials in a 5th grade classroom? That is wrong. In Florida, we've done something about it. Ultimately, though, parents need to be able to make meaningful choices about what school their child attends. And so we have universal school choice in Florida. Since we've done that, our school districts have done better as well because they have to up their game. If charter schools are offering, if private schools are offering, school districts have to offer. So we're much better off in education today than we were 25 years ago. It's not even close. I think we need that nationally. So how do you do it? Because I look at like Chicago or Philadelphia. They're never going to be able to give these kids any type of lifeline. The teacher union controls the entire education apparatus, Los Angeles, all these places. So we're going to do a program federally, not through education department, because I think that's a problem, but through the Treasury Department, similar to what we have in Florida. Corporations can write off a certain amount of their tax liability. It goes to a scholarship granting organization like we have in Florida, and then there's criteria, and parents can apply, and you can get a scholarship. 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, whatever it would be. We did with $1 billion a year, we did 100,000 kids with scholarships. So if you just did 25 billion nationally, you would be able to give scholarships to an awful lot of working class families. And I think that would liberate them from what's going on. And I think it'd be a huge deal. The other thing we've done in Florida is we've recognized you can't have colleges and universities just be hotbed of indoctrination. That's not serving our country well. Look what's going on at like Harvard and Penn with the anti-Semitism. You have students out there protesting in favor of Hamas. These are terrorists, and this is what's happening in our universities. So there's some sickness there that I think we have to address, and we're going to address it through we're going to break up this accreditation cartel. You're going to be needing to be a traditional university with a classical mission if you want to get accredited to get federal money. And we are going to yank federal money from some of these universities that have gone totally off the rails. It's not serving our country well. And I just think to myself, you graduate from like Harvard Medical School now, and it's like, okay, can a man get pregnant? If you can't even answer that question, that tells me they're indoctrinating people in those schools. They're not doing the evidence-based type of education that we used to think was the way forward for this country. So taking the ideology out of those institutions, focusing them on the classical mission, we've had good success in Florida on that, but we need to do it nationwide.
Time is flying here, so we only actually have a couple minutes left. Tim, you have the next question.
Okay. With the country more divided than ever before, how do you feel you would bring people with different viewpoints to the table to discuss a better solution for all?
Well, I think part of it is just my philosophy is if I take a stand on an issue and that's where you want me to be, you can count on me. I will be there for you. I will get the job done. At the same time, you may have a battle on an issue. There may be the next issue that comes. Some of the people you battled with on the first issue, you may be able to work with on the second issue. So I may disagree with someone 80% of the time, and we'll fight those battles, but you also got to be willing to work together on the 20%. And that's what I've done in Florida. You look, some of our high-profile things where we're standing up against Fauci during COVID, the Democrats opposed me on that. They wanted lockdowns. When we stood up against Disney to make sure we didn't have the sexualization of the curriculum, the Democrats opposed me. They wanted that in the schools. Okay, fine. But a lot of the other stuff we've done, I've gotten unanimous support for a lot of what we've done. We've restored Florida's Everglades more than anyone thought was possible. We've raised teacher salaries. We've done things to help police recruitment that have gotten that. So that's just how I am. I don't take the stuff personally. Politics, people will attack you. They do that. That's just part of the business. You've got to be, as a leader, you've got to rise above that. You've got to say, okay, here's an issue. I need to advance this for the betterment of the people I represent. You fight that.
We only have 1 minute left. Jade, you're going to have our next question.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on sending billions to Ukraine, and how would your foreign policy be different from the current administration's?
Well, they've sent billions and billions and billions to do things like pay salaries for bureaucrats in Ukraine, pay for their pensions and stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, you're going deeper in debt to do that, but you're not doing our own border here in this country. So we have to put our people first. I'll be a strong president internationally. We can't be isolationists. Of course you're going to deal with international issues, but it all goes back to what is the best interest of the people of the United States. And everything you do has got to be through that prism. What they've done in D.C., they've ignored major problems that affect our people here at home, including the border, in favor of doing things that is very difficult to justify when you talk about that kind of spending. I would not just send money with no strategy or anything, with no end in sight, and do some type of blank check. Biden's policies basically just keep sending things without having any end game. You got to have an end game, and we need to bring this in for a landing.
Well, Governor, that is actually all the time that we have for television. Thank you for joining us, and to our panel, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Our roundtable with Ron DeSantis will continue. You can watch that extended conversation on our mobile app or online at kcci.com.